Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Todd Suddeth. I serve as the Program Director for the Todd Anthony Bell National Resource Center on the African American Male. I welcome you to our annual Gathering of Men event. For opening remarks, I will ask if Dr. Valerie Lee, who is the Vice Provost of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, as well as the Vice President for the Office of Outreach and Student Engagement, and the Chief Diversity Officer for the university, to give some open remarks.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Although I hope many of you in attendance have already made yourselves familiar with the services provided by the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Of course, it's the Office of Diversity and Inclusion that I'm bringing you greetings on behalf of. I would like to briefly mention the services we offer in order that the community building and fellowship inspired here may continue after the gathering has ended. Founded some 40 years ago, ODI has undertaken the task of promoting inclusive excellence through our many pathway, pipeline, and programmatic initiatives. Most notably, we run 3 centers: the Frank W. Hale Junior Black Cultural Center, the Latino and Latin American Space for Enrichment and Research, or LASER, and of course, the Todd A. Bell National Resource Center on the African American Male. Fortunately, I have been present at several of these Gathering of Men events in the past, and as is always the case, I'm pleased to be a part of the work that is and will inevitably happen during this evening of togetherness. Now, I'm certain I have piqued the interest of more than a few in the audience, since this is a gathering of men, and I am not a man, I get that. However, while I cannot speak to you about manhood from personal experience, except the fact that I am married to a man and am the mother of 2 adult twin sons, I do feel qualified to say a few words by way of greetings about the performance and practice of masculinities. As men, it's good that you gather, that you shore up one another, that you lean on one another, and that you affirm one another, especially because you live in a world that might misdefine you when you wear a hoodie or walk through gated communities or fail to raise your hands high enough or assume the position fast enough. Upon the 45th anniversary of James Baldwin's work, The Fire Next Time, African-American writer Randall Keenan published a sequel called The Fire This Time. And I want to just share a message from the introduction where Keenan is speaking to his godson who has just come of age. And I always turn to literature because at heart I'm a professor of literature. I'm a former chair of the Department of English here, and so literature is deep in my heart. So writer Randall Keenan writes, "For many in the world, in their jaded eyes, alas, now and for many years to come, you will be a demon. For the next 30 years or so, you will be among the most despised group in the homeland, the young African-American male, the black male. This will not be a reality. You are much more than that. But as an idea, this view of you will have great power. This world will, with a great deal of might and resource, try to define you. But you must know better. You must remember you are not a problem. Did you know once upon a time black folks could fly? Or so it has been said, a hidden truth, a metaphor, a way of looking at yourself and at the world. Remember that when you think you are stuck in the mud, remember that once you can fly." So much of African American literature speaks to our ability to fly. Whether we are talking about Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man or Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon, our writers remind us that we do not have to be mired down in the dirt or mud by the weight of oppression. If you create a learning community, if you keep your cohort strong, all of you will be able to fly in ways your ancestors never imagined but had hoped for. And you will know that manhood is not a condition to be prescribed by others, but rather a self-assumed identity measured in action, character, and commitment. Thank you, and enjoy tonight's proceedings, and enjoy each other.
All right. Good evening again. It is my pleasure to serve as the moderator for this panel discussion tonight. In thinking back to some of our past Gathering of Men events, as I was looking through some of the files and pictures and some of the videos, you know, I was thinking back to Dr. Frank Hill, the late great Dr. Hill, when he spoke about President Barack Obama right on the eve of winning the presidential election. Then I also think back to Jordan Miller and his comments and his remarks about being responsible for the community that you're in. And also to Keith Key as well, and then to last year, Dr. Robert Franklin, who was the former president of Morehouse College. And so we've had a lot of great speakers for this event. The reason we have this event is a welcome back type of event for students, but not just students, but also faculty and staff. For some students, this is where you form some of your relationships. Maybe you had an opportunity to talk to a community professional or faculty staff person for a research opportunity or internship. And then for some of the faculty and staff, this might be the first time that you might have met some of your colleagues on campus. And this is the reason why we have this event. Tonight, I'm really excited about this event. This is one of the ones I've been probably the most excited about. And you can go back on YouTube and look at past videos. I've never said that before. So I don't say that for every single one. But I'm really excited about tonight because of the real life applications that can come from this event. So the theme for tonight is looking at what does it mean to be a black male professional. And so the three esteemed panelists that we have are going to share their experiences, their accomplishments, their challenges. And I'm really excited about the opportunity to ask questions. After I ask my questions, we will open it up to the audience for a brief question and answer session as well. Before I start, I do ask that if you, well, it's not if, everyone has a cell phone now. If you can please put it on vibrate or silent. Thank you. So what I'll do first is, starting for the person nearest me to the end, I'll ask each panelist to introduce themselves. Beginning with the hometown, a little bit of information about your academic background and your professional background. And I ask that you be brief as well. And just to lay some ground rules, I do have a lot of questions, so I will ask that, although I know you will want to expand on certain points, that I do want to get through as many questions as possible, so I might have to reel you back in sometimes. And it's out of love. It's definitely out of love. Same thing goes for the audience. Please, just questions, not commentary, when we get to the question and answer session for audience members. So again, we'll start again. Please share a little bit about your background.
Let me know if you can hear me. That's good. My name is Bruce Wimbish. We're sitting in my hometown, so I'm very happy, proud alumnus of The Ohio State University, as well as born here at the Ohio State University Hospital, back then as it was named. I'm the Director of Marketing and communications for the Greater Columbus Sports Commission. We work a lot with teams and organizations, including Ohio State, to bring special sporting events here to the city to help drive economic development, marketing, and image for the city. And my path is not traditional. I look forward to telling you more about that. But I went from graduating from Worthington Kimberlin High School in 1996 to the University of Cincinnati in 2000, and back to Ohio State to get my MBA and then my master's in sports management before starting out as a professional.
And my name is John Jackson. I am from the metropolis of Zanesville, Ohio, all 25,000 of the residents there. Went to Miami, Ohio back in 1986 to study accounting and finance. After I graduated from Miami University, came here to Ohio State on a Dean Scholarship. And I'll go into a little bit more depth about the relevancy of that Dean Scholarship. Spent about the last 20 years serving in a capacity as a lawyer doing mergers and acquisitions for multiple Fortune 500 companies and at a large law firm in Minneapolis. And 6 weeks ago, I decided to do a career change. And now I'm serving as the Chief of Staff for the President of Nationwide's Financial Services Division. So trying to position myself to be a more active participant on the business side.
My name is Carter Stewart. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was happy to hear about the former president of Morehouse visiting. I grew up on Spelman College's campus across the street from Morehouse, and that's when actually a large part of my learning about manhood occurred when I was growing up there. I went to Stanford University for college. I came back to New York and taught high school for a couple of years. Got my master's at Columbia in education, and then I went to Harvard for law school. After law school, I went to a firm back in California, and then I became an assistant U.S. attorney, a federal prosecutor in San Jose, California. Met and married a wonderful woman who, after 3 years of marriage, informed me that we were moving to Columbus, Ohio, where I had never been before in my life. I came kicking and screaming, but that was 9 years ago, and I've actually fallen in love with it. It's a great place. I came back, worked at a law firm here, Vorey, Sater, Seymour & Pease, for 4 years, and then 5 years ago, President Obama nominated me to be the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Ohio. So I've served in that capacity for the last 5 years. But when he leaves office, I leave office, so I'll be looking for a job.
All right, so first question, and Carter, we'll go back to you first. And this question is for all of you. How would you characterize yourself as a student through your K through 12 schooling, and later as an undergraduate and graduate professional student?
K through 12, I was a good student. My parents taught us, I have a brother, they taught us from an early age that education is everything. My parents were educators, my grandparents were educators, my great-grandparents were educators. So education was held up as the most important value we could aspire to as we were growing up, and I stuck with that K through 12. College was a little bit different. College, I was across the country from my family. Newfound freedom. I wasn't as good a student as I should have been the first couple of years. It took me a while to get my footing and to balance the fun side with the studious side. So by the time I graduated, I was fine, I was good, but it took me a while to get there because I had to learn how to balance the fun with the studies. And then in grad school, I actually was a fine student because I had worked for a few years. And when you go to grad school, it's good to have a work ethic that you treat it like a job. Not the same as college, not the same kind of fun atmosphere, but I treated it like a job, and I just stuck my nose down and went through it. I was not at the top of my class, but I wasn't at the bottom either. So in looking back, I wish in college that I had started out stronger, and I wish I had taken advantage of everything that college has to offer. Here at Ohio State, I'm sure you have speakers come in from around the world. You have leaders of countries, you have education leaders, you have government leaders. I wish when I were in college that I had gone and listened to those people more instead of having it more fun. So in retrospect, I wish I had been a better student in college and taken more advantage of all the educational opportunities that were there.
And it seems like we have a similar experience. I graduated in high school with a 3.85 grade point average, and I was an academic All-American as a football player, and so school came easy to me. Primary focus was in math and in science. When I came to college, I had that same kind of cocky attitude, thinking it was going to be as simple as it was in high school, and brought that same kind of half work ethic, so to speak, and I had a rude awakening my first semester. I experienced F's for the first time in my life. Experienced a C as a class for the first time in my life. And so that was an awakening for me to understand, just like in athletics, that you got to step your game up from what you were used to in high school. Same thing academically. And because of that experience, my first semester, I spent the next 3 years, pretty much hunkering down and focusing on my grades that enabled me to graduate with a 3.3, which still wasn't at the level that I wanted to, but it's still decent enough in light of what I had done my first semester, which is a common theme for a lot of brothers that I went to school with at Miami. And similar to what Carter was talking about, is when I went to law school, I came with a total different mindset about, this is serious, this is the big leagues, this is, people who are really at the top of their game are now competing at Ohio State. And so I took Ohio State's law school a lot more serious and ended up being on their law review, as a part of that focus. And so I'm just thankful for the fact that I had a good foundation. I had a moment of weakness where I did what typical freshmen do, and that I was able to have the discipline to kind of bring that back and at least put myself in a competitive enough position to be able to go to a law school environment and be successful there.
I would start with one word, and that being underachiever. I wasn't at the level of John, but I would say I was above 3.5, all the way through going into college. But if you listen to my mom, she will not forget the one doctor who said, I potentially had the potential to be a Rhodes Scholar. All the other doctors said, he's going to be good, but she always reminds me of that. But what I learned K through 12 and going forward is I kind of drifted away from being an academic and information, where I wanted to be more a doer and a builder. And I saw the value of people as you just go. And so I drifted away from, just being an academic and always having the information and really wanting that 4.0. I wanted to be strong. Like these guys, I played sports, football, basketball, track, and field. But it was just this natural gravitation towards not staying and wanting to have the 4.0 and having all this information, taking honors classes. I saw the value of people. I liked organizations. I liked projects. And so I kind of started trying to find my path. And so I gravitated more towards that than the academic, not even close to being a Rhodes Scholar. So I was happy, but the other part of that is staying inspired. And I imagine that's some of the challenge that many of you have in this room today with us, is staying inspired. And so I definitely found roles. I was probably a nerd. I didn't have as much fun as these guys had in college. But I was, I was kind of quiet, but I couldn't stay inspired. And there were definitely roles where I wasn't invested like I should have been, whether it was a semester, a quarter, a project. But that's, as I started to know, the reason why is because I was trying to find my path and what I was passionate about. Because I knew for me, in order to get to my maximum potential, I needed to combine those two, my pursuit and my potential and my passion. And thankfully I found it, but as we'll talk more, it took me a while as well.
And we'll start with you, Mr. Jackson. What experiences shaped your decision to pursue your designated career? And again, this will be a question for everyone.
There was really two specific things. So I told you I grew up in Zanesville. There was only one black professional in the entire city, and he was a dentist. There wasn't a business owner. There was nobody who had even their own kind of black restaurant, so to speak. And I guess technically the only other professionals were the barbers that were there in the city. And so when everybody that I knew that was of my culture worked in a factory, and that nobody really had an advanced education, the one thing I wanted to do was to go understand the business. And my desire was really to help educate other black people about how to successfully run a business, how to successfully keep your accounting books so that the money that you make, you're able to keep it. And one of the things that ended up just happening just by accident, and we'll talk a little bit more later on in the conversation, is really law school was just an accident. Some people will say it was, God laid it in my lap, because I never had any aspiration, never had any thought about being a lawyer, because there's nobody on either side of my family, on my mother's or on my father's side, that had an advanced degree. I didn't know any black attorneys. And so other than a fluke situation where the woman who was the equivalent of Dr. Lee, talked to me about it and brokered the opportunity here at Ohio State, was the first time that I even thought about being a lawyer. And so thank the Lord for a woman named Rosemary McCullough, because of her is why I'm sitting here today.
When I finished college, I went into the profession that my parents were in, that my grandparents were in, my great-grandparents were in. I taught high school, and I absolutely loved it. And I had thought that I could do this for my career. But I got caught up in the competition that I think has gotten worse today, of thinking an undergrad degree isn't enough. You have to have a grad degree. And actually, you don't even need just one grad degree, you need two. It seemed like so many of my friends were getting JD MBAs, people were getting their becoming MDs, and then getting MBAs, becoming lawyers. In retrospect, it's a little crazy. I don't think you have to do those things just because other people are doing them. And I think we'll get to the section where we'll talk about different choices I would have made. But I thought I had to go to grad school because everybody else was, and I thought, well, I'll go to grad school, and if I don't like the grad school I go to, I can always go back to teaching, which was not the right way of thinking, because when I went to law school, I graduated with $100,000 in debt, and I could not go back to teaching. So it was a dramatic life choice. But the reason I chose law school is I figured I could practice law, which seemed interesting. I liked the idea of being a litigator, being on my feet, talking to court, to judges, to juries. That seemed fun. When you're a lawyer, you can write policy. I was interested in government. As a lawyer, a lot of lawyers run businesses. You could also teach. So it seemed like a very versatile degree, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, so I went to law school. And I chose this profession in terms of the U.S. Attorney's Office because I believe in public service, and I wanted to combine my skill with public service, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now.
For me, staying consistent with needing to be inspired and liking to build. My first major at the University of Cincinnati was architecture. I love to build, I love to design, I love to see buildings of all shapes and sizes be built and go up. I love to see skylines change. I remember going to the University of Cincinnati and like halfway through it, keep coming back home on weekends to see my mom in Columbus and just seeing all the building. And that was fascinating. But what happened in the first quarter of my first year at Cincinnati is we were sitting behind the computer for 7 hours during the day. And so something that I loved to do for years, going through pre-K through 12, whether it's Legos and all that stuff, I just gave it up, and I knew it wasn't for me. And so I shifted over to business operations, and it still didn't land me in the area that I am now in marketing and media relations. But I made that change right away. So I knew that was there. I knew I was an ideas person, generating, brainstorming, working with people. And so that led me over to operations. Consulting was very big at that time before the collapse in the industry. So you have this outside agency that comes in and look at how you do your processes and your systems, and you want them to be better, you want them to be more efficient. And that's what I thought would be good. I could look at stuff critically, analyze, and think of solutions. And so it was interesting that I just kept moving over there, but again, that wasn't far enough. And so all along, I'm a student athlete like these guys, and I love sports, but I wasn't curious enough to explore that until God whispers at you for a little while They'll whisper in your ear, they'll say something to you, and then sometimes they'll just have to scream at you until you get it. And so it took me a long time for that light bulb to go off of how much I love sports. But even that wasn't enough where I was, you know, I knew I wasn't going to play. Then all you see is what you see in TV with Ahmad Rashad back in the day interviewing Michael Jordan, and I thought sports broadcasting, that was it. And that faded, but again, I slowly started to drift back to sports, and it still took a couple of progressions of, oh, I want to be a general manager, I want to put together a team, and then I want to be a team president and run both the basketball and the business side. Then I just want to be a person that's over the communications department as I went through my career. So you went through all of these progressions, and so those are all the experiences that I have that I know we'll talk more about that just kept pushing me to where I'm supposed to be, but those are some of them for now.
Great, thank you. And actually, we're going to come right back to you, Mr. Wimbish. If you could go back in time to change something about your educational experience, what would you do differently?
It simply would be, you know, as John and Carter talked about, having that network and people to introduce you to the variety of life. Is I had the curiosity to want to be in sports, but I didn't have anyone within my family or close friends or even at school to introduce me to that side. And I wasn't curious enough just to keep pushing. So imagine me being in the MBA program at Ohio State. I'm getting there, I'm the only one of 150 students that wants to be in sports, and I'm sending letters, cold letters, you know, how people talk about cold calling. They don't know you, you just cold calling. I was sending cold letters to all the GMs of every single NBA team. They're asking for an opportunity, and I still really didn't know that there's this entire business side of the sports industry, that what you see on TV, there's an entire team producing that and making all of that happen. And it wasn't until somebody accidentally mentioned to me, do you know there's a degree for that? You can take classes for that. There's this whole other side. And so that's when the light bulb went on, and it still took me a few non-paid internships to do that before I got to my first full-time job in sports with the Cleveland Cavaliers. But if I could go back, it would be having that network and that knowledge that I try to give students now and give people in my family about that side. That would have saved me $30,000, $40,000 student loan. But I just love what I do so much, whether it was with the NBA or the Sports Commission now. I can only imagine if I would have had another 2 or 3 years to add to my career to do that.
The things that I would probably focus on changing, first of all, I wouldn't have went to Miami University first and foremost. It was a great learning institution, but one of the things I've learned as I've gotten older is the importance of relationships and kind of lifetime friendships. You know, when I went to school back in 1986, there were 200 black people on campus out of 16,000. And so when you start thinking about who you're going to be creating lifetime relationships with, you know, my first change would have been to come either to Ohio State or to have gone to an HBCU and really have more what I would consider an environment that was conducive towards, you know, boosting me up as an individual student. You know, Miami's kind of theory was your prime time, you get here and you survive. There really wasn't an environment of cultivating John Jacksons of the world. And so I would have loved to have been in an environment that was more supportive of me as an individual. But the second thing that I wish I would have done is I wish I would have leveraged more of the professors and more of the administrators while I was on campus, you know, and just really leveraging the network. And I'm going to give you a quick story to just show you how arrogant I was in terms of thinking I could figure it out on my own. And when I was in law school, so keep in mind, this is not only an undergrad, but I did this in law school, so I think I'm smart. I got this Dean's Scholarship. I'm on the law review. And so I'm thinking about where do I want to get a job at, and so I'm focusing here in Columbus, I'm thinking about Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Minneapolis. Now, at the time, I had a cousin who was married to the mayor of Cleveland, whose name was Michael White. And my arrogant self said, because I'm intelligent and because I'm law review, that my resume is strong enough in and of itself, and that any law firm should want to have me. Well, keep in mind, big firms in Cleveland, are getting people from Harvard, Michigan, Virginia, Notre Dame, best law schools in the country. And so the moral of the story is I didn't get a job in Cleveland. And so the moral of the story, when I tell other people, they're like, how stupid and ignorant can you be to not leverage the relationships that you clearly have, because the rest of the world does the exact same thing. And it seems like we're the only ones who believe that we should only accomplish things based upon our merits. And so that would be the one thing I tell each and every person in here is bring your merits to the table, but leverage all the relationships that you have that can open doors for you that you're not prepared or don't have the ability to open for yourself.
Mine are pretty simple and not that deep. I would have taught high school longer, just to play it out and see where it went. I would have wanted to leave when I wanted to leave, not because I thought I had to leave. And if I backed it up even further to college, I would have majored in something different. I was a poli-sci major, political science, and that was something that I thought I should do. That's what the experts said. Poli-sci is the best major to have if you want to go into government or law or what have you. So I did that. But in retrospect, I would have pursued theater. There's a creative side to me that I've never truly expressed in terms of writing stories and acting and things like that, that if I had to do it over again, I'd try to major in theater.
I would have never guessed that.
Not many people do.
Well, yeah, I guess that's another rule. What is said here stays here as well.
That's a big take, isn't it?
We can edit some stuff out of it. I want to skip down to one question I think that will encompass some of the other questions that we have. And this again will be for everyone on the panel. And we'll start with you first, Mr. Stewart. In your opinion, how has being a black male shaped your professional experiences in your designated career? And how do you think these experiences might differ from your non-black male colleagues and black female colleagues as well?
In terms of how it shaped my career, it helped cement my desire to do public service. Because growing up in Atlanta, which is the cradle of the civil rights movement in a lot of ways, growing up with parents who were racially aware, they put into our heads the struggle. My dad would tell us every time we took a trip from Atlanta to drive up to Boston or wherever, literally every time we got in a car to go on a road trip, he would say, sons, you have no idea what it was like. You have no idea what it was like when we took road trips from Chicago to our family in Virginia. When you stopped, you didn't know if you were going to be humiliated at a restaurant. You didn't know if you were going to be beat up at a gas station. You had no idea what it was like. And those stories stuck with me in terms of the struggle that has occurred to make our society better. And it instilled in me a desire to also contribute towards making society better in some way. So the public service definitely had a big impact in terms of growing up as an African-American man. In terms of professional career, it impacted me in the sense that the other message that they sent me and my brother was, when you go to a law firm, you have to be twice as good as somebody who's not black, as a white person, in order to get to the same place. So it gave me a challenge, I suppose, that I had to work harder, I had to be better, I had to make sure that my work compared not just favorably, but much more favorably with my peers in order to be treated the same. I think that's true of some people. I don't think it's true of all people. I think hopefully it's not as bad as it was 60 years ago or 50 years ago. But I do believe that there is some element there. Racism has not gone away. So I think that spurred me to work harder.
And I had a similar kind of experience. And, I started off with the belief that being an African-American male, particularly in an environment where what it is I'm selling is my intelligence, that put me at a competitive disadvantage, because the perception is that black men aren't as strategically thinking as the rest of society. And so that's kind of how I came up through college, that's how I came up through law school, and kind of my experiences in the law firm were very similar to that. Now, that's the downside. I'm going to explain to you the upside, and had a black male just say this to me literally 2 days ago. He said, being a black male in corporate America gives me an unfair competitive advantage in comparison to my peers. And that's the first time I've ever heard a black man say that, and so I have a question. And so what he explained to me, he actually validated kind of my personal experience, which is if you, because of your discipline, if you, because of you believe in that concept of needing to be twice as good, and you bring that worth ethic to what you do on a day-to-day basis, and your grade point average reflects that, your accomplishments reflects that. Here's the reality. You're part of the talented 10th. You're part of that narrow group that everybody's looking for to be a part of their business. And if you happen to be somebody that fits within that narrow definition, then guess what? You're of high demand. And so I've been in high demand for the last 17 years of my career, in large part because what I did straight out of law school was deemed acceptable, which positioned me for my second position, which just further strengthened my kind of outside view. And then as I've continued to go on in my career, it just began to grow and grow and grow and grow. And so guess what? If they're looking for a senior executive with 20 years of experience, guess what? How many African-American males do you know can say they've been doing mergers and acquisitions for Fortune 500 companies for 20 years? How many black males do you know that's 46 years old that could say I'm the chief of staff for the president of a business unit that does over $2 billion in sales? So at the end of the day, when it's about opportunities presenting themselves, at this stage in my career, I have a unique, unfettered competitive advantage compared to my other counterparts. But the bottom line is it took me 20 years of diligence, it took me 20 years of commitment, it took me 20 years of doing things that other people probably didn't feel it was worth their while to do for me to be here. And so the message is that every single person in this room can position themselves to have a competitive advantage. It's just a question of what you're willing to do to invest in yourself to help create that.
No, I would say both of these are the duality that black men have, is that burden that you can either carry proudly or you can try to disassociate yourself with, but also if you carry it proudly, turning it into your competitive advantage. And I, like Carter, heard the stories from my family, saw things of my own life that kept that burden there and allows me even now to not let go of it and to never go into a sports arena, a boardroom, football stadium or anything and take that for granted or act expected that everybody is going to know my track record or John's track record or Carter's track record. I just will never let go of that feeling and never try to get out in front of myself where somebody else may bring me back. So I'm always going to stay there and play from that position and then surprise myself with all the good things that can come. I will also say one of the great things, like here at Ohio State with Todd, is when I was at the University of Cincinnati, I actually was able to take a class called Black Male Issues. And phenomenal reading, videos, teaching. I wish I could even take that same class now, 20 years later almost, and go back through it, but it allowed me to carry that burden professionally and just be better, but also critically analyze the things that were going on. When you see a movie or you see things play out in the media with the NFL, as we have with the 2 weeks, you can look at different perspectives. And I would say getting into that sports environment, everything that they talk about is true, but that has definitely shaped my professional experience of why I'm so proud to be in the industry. Because if you were to go back and read $40 Million Slaves and understand how much sports means to our culture and how far we actually go back, then it probably would incentivize some of us to want to be in the industry more. So when I still, to this day, get in that industry and meetings, and there's still not enough black men and black women and diverse professionals on the business side of sports, the people that actually make things happen for all the athletes to do the phenomenal things they do. So I can never take it for granted because there just aren't enough of us in there. But I will say I just still carry that burden to never get out in front of myself where somebody's not going to have that and they're going to try to make me remember the things that we struggled through, before. But I definitely struggle a little bit because I also see the black athlete glorified, victimized, coddled, and you see that it can be very beneficial for the opportunities that it does present, but it can also be very detrimental to building yourself up to be the best person where you're self-reliant and self-sufficient. And so there definitely are some, if we had more hours to talk, some definitely stories we could tell that hopefully could help us be better. But that's my black male experience in the sports industry is definitely a unique one.
Thank you. And what we're going to do now, because I do want to get to some questions from the audience. I just have just a couple more questions I want to ask. So I'm just going to call on you individually. Mr. Stewart, I'm going to start with you first. How do you maintain balance between work and home? And we can edit this out.
I mean, the easy answer is I don't. I've been on panels and I've watched panels, both with men on them, with women on them, and I've yet to hear somebody say, I got it all figured out, unless they're maybe a movie star or somebody who has a tremendous amount of money. It's an ongoing struggle. I have 3 kids, 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old. My wife works in the sense that she's an author and she travels frequently. And it comes down to partnership, understanding, compromise. I mean, that's what marriage is about, really. But there's some nights where I have to work late, like tonight I'm coming home late. Next week she's coming home late. So we're always stressed out. We're always wondering and asking ourselves, how can we do better? I think the one lesson that I try to live by is prioritize family. I mean, if it comes down between work and family, I will choose family. I have not gone to some interviews because of family commitments. I have not done everything I could professionally in some circumstances because of family. So for me, family's first, but that doesn't mean the stress is gone. It's just a choice that I make and I deal with the consequences. But I think until society changes in terms of the expected workflow, the workday, now it's 24/7 with the BlackBerry. If you don't respond in 30 minutes, then you're late. Until that changes, I'm not sure how I'll be able to find work-life balance.
Mr. Jackson, real briefly, can you talk about, based on your experience, what skills do you think students entering the workforce, what skills do you think students need to be successful in their chosen field?
It's very interesting that you asked me this question because I was watching it in motion this past week. Probably the 2 things that I think are most fundamental, and I think brothers are particularly prepared for this. You just got to kind of refine your skills with public speaking. You cannot be effective in the business world, in the world of education, or any other context where you're trying to have a career if you're not able to communicate to the person on the other side of the table. Okay, whether you're trying to raise money, whether you're trying to ask for a raise, whether you're trying to just give a presentation on behalf of a project that you're looking for, it really doesn't matter about how you're able to be influenced to others based upon what it is that you say. The second one, which is the corollary to that, is being equally influential in terms of the written word and understanding how to put the King's English in a written form. It would be unbelievable about some of the prose that I see in terms of what people write, PowerPoint presentations. It's somewhat demoralizing and embarrassing just about how lax they are and how their inability to really get their point across puts them in a light where people don't see you for the value that you are. I mean, it's just as simple as this. And it took me a long time to understand this. nobody's going to spend the time to invest in you to understand the substance of who you are. They're going to be basing it off of the packaging. And your packaging is how you orate. You see how I threw that big term in there? I call it the black man's lyrical wizardry, okay? In terms of how we communicate with one another, how we communicate to women, in terms of trying to get their attention. It's the same skill set, but you just have to morph it in a way that's conducive for a business environment. So to me, being fluid in the written word and being able to talk the oral word in a public environment are probably the two most fundamental things that you can do, which are soft skills. The technical skills you can learn through class study, but those are two things that really make a difference in terms of leadership and your progression in the business world.
Mr. Wimbish, would you like to add on to it?
Absolutely. I'll stay consistent with critical analysis and being able to look at certain issues and problems and challenges from different perspectives. In my role with Cleveland Cavaliers, it was on the business side, but it was media relations. And John brings up a good point. I, here at Ohio State, over my time in Cincinnati, did not have media training. You know, I was doing a sports management degree after taking out a little elective. And so it was my business background that the Cavs said, we have this new position, there's no blueprint for it. We want you to do the media relations for the ticket sales, the marketing, the sponsorship, community relations, and the arena, not the team. Those are the 5 things we want you to do. And so I understood what was going on in those areas, and they taught me how to do the media relations, of how to write and how to speak and how to pitch interviews to reporters, how to do press releases, media advisories, press conferences. And I still love that. I actually love the communication side more than the marketing side, if you could believe that. But the critical analysis of understanding all those different departments allows you to get up to that leadership point where you can lead an entire organization. And so, again, as we talked about, you know, being a general manager to a team president to a vice president of communications, all of those were my progressions. And now I'm just like, you know, I want to lead an organization and I need to know all these different areas. So critical analysis is very strong as one of those traits. And then I'll say something, especially for black men, as was referenced before, the ability to speak to your counterparts and your different counterparts, and emotional intelligence. So in addition to lifelong learning, staying up on current issues and things that apply to your jobs, it's being able to read people. Emotional intelligence is going into a conversation or a breakfast and you know the person's not listening to you. And you need to speed your elevator pitch up. Or you need to slow it down for them that you're talking too fast. And especially as young, and myself included, I go to our board meetings for the Sports Commission and I've had board members come up to me and say, you're great, we love what you're doing, slow down, project more. And so it's interesting that you have to do all of those things, but emotional intelligence allows you to read people. If you're a leader of a team, you can't lead each team member the same. Each person has buttons and things that trigger positive performance, negative performance, and you have to read those, but you can also just read people and you know when you have them, and you know where you gotta keep still working with them, but it just allows you to communicate and lead effectively by reading people, knowing a little bit about them. Once you get past the packaging and the presentation, then you get into the substance, and that allows you to be a very dynamic leader. So I would say critical analysis of issues, and then emotional intelligence with people will go an absolute long way.
Can I throw a quick plug in? Something I wanted to bring to you guys' attention to just kind of reinforce this whole idea of knowing how to present yourself in an oral format to make it most relevant to you, because you're not really going to be engaging in public speaking for a while. So let me make it real for you. Interviewing is your #1 objective. Considering that interviewing season is starting for internships and all that, probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Mr. Suddeth and I, we're actually in conversations right now. We're trying to coordinate a conference call at some point in the next 3 days, hopefully, that's really focused on representatives from 100 Black Men, representatives from Corporate Connections, which is a group of African American males at Nationwide, to come here on campus and actually do mock interviews for the students here on this campus. And so definitely want to put in for each and every one of you the importance of listening to whenever that communication comes out. I highly recommend that you take part in it, as insecure as you might feel, or as secure and cocky as you might feel. It is definitely in your best interest to come and participate and just work on your craft.
Thank you both. Black man's lyrical wizardry. So I'm gonna take that. I'm gonna cite you, but I'm gonna take that. Definitely, again, Mr. Wimbish bringing up emotional intelligence I think is very, very important. And be sure to talk to my wife tonight about partnership, understanding and compromise. Great. So a lot of good information. I hope that you were taking notes. What we're going to do now is we're going to open it up so that you all can ask some questions. So I'm going to ask for probably 5 people first in regards to questions, and we'll see how we're doing on time. If we still have some time, then we'll allow for more questions as well. So anyone who has any questions? We will start here, here, and here. So we will go with you first, sir. If you can just stand up, introduce yourself, and ask your question.
Good evening. My name is Steve Miller. I'm Senior Development Officer at Mount Carmel Hospital. I'm also here representing St. Charles Preparatory School as a board member, and I brought some students with me this evening. I wanted to ask the panel to try to provide a perspective or communicate to these high school gentlemen as well as some other young people here in the room about the value of leadership and how important it plays a role in their world academically, personally, and socially.
I'll go ahead and give it a start. Leadership was kind of what I was intimating at early when I think it was by the grace of God you started getting away from just academia and having information and being kind of one-sided where you're competent, you've got a great skill set, you're always going to be working on that. Lifelong learning is great, but when you start to find your purpose, there's so much leadership there. And again, the emotional intelligence, the critical analysis, the core understanding of functions of whatever organization or group you're trying to lead. But I remember being at the University of Cincinnati, and that was seeing all these different organizations on campus. That continued to help me pull away from just focusing on my classes and all this knowledge and the exams and seeing this purpose and seeing the value of people and getting things done. It was like your small version of the world in this campus. And the one thing that I learned, and I didn't again learn it soon enough, and so I'm hoping this is helping, is networking. And even at that level, this is before email. I still have my Hotmail as my personal email that I got back at campus, and I still didn't get it enough where there are still individuals from University of Cincinnati that I went to school with that I have no idea where they are now. And more and more as the world changes, leadership is relationships. And not just knowing people on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter, but having relationships that go above and beyond that circumstantial encounter. And so these two gentlemen, I was very excited to have the invite to be a part of this because we've networked. I'm not sure if both will remember, but I met John when I was at the CAS because he brought up, I believe, a Black MBA Association group, and we helped host the group. Archie Griffin came up to host them, and it was a great time. But my time at Cincinnati, getting into sports, you just see the value of networking and having all those relationships and nurturing them. And then with Carter, and again, this goes above and beyond myself, a mutual friend that went to Ohio State Law with my wife while she was looking for a job. In our transition from Cleveland to Columbus 4 years ago, connected us with Carter, and she exchanged emails with him. And you find out who the real friends are, even if you don't know them well, because they will go above and beyond and actually really stay in touch with you and care about you as you're in that very low point of your career potentially. And so things that Carter did for my wife, of checking back with her every couple of weeks, how's it going, did you hear from this person? I have never forgotten that, so I'm happy to see him today. But also when I really try to help people, and there's less time as you go up the ladder a little bit to reach back and help others, just the volume. If you can't do it, don't do it at all. Unless you can shepherd that person through that process, don't do it all. Social media, there's easy ways to share job postings, but when somebody needs help, go all the way in for those few that you can help.
We'll take one more and then we'll go to the next person.
Let me just give to you kind of from a high school perspective and from a college perspective about leadership and development, because I always want to make it relevant to you at the stage in life you're at. You're in a competition to get to college. You're in a competition for financial aid. What you have to ultimately do is differentiate yourself in comparison to the thousands of other students who are going after the exact same thing that you want. I didn't realize that. I thought I was the big dog coming out of Zanesville, the #1 ranked black male in school, and so I was always that guy. But when you start realizing that you're in competition with 25,000 other people across the country, all of a sudden people in these programs are sitting there trying to figure out, I'm looking at 400 resumes. How do I pick the top 10? And so leadership is really about how you go about differentiating yourself from the other people who didn't think it was important, who were too lazy to do it, who were too scared. And part of leadership is being willing to sit there and say, this is so important to me and I have a passion about this, that I'm going to rally and get other people to come on board for free and accomplish an objective. And that's not a simple thing as just going to class and getting an A or a B. That's about people skills, that's emotional intelligence, as he was talking about. And those are the kind of things that differentiate yourself in high school. And that and I'm just going to be honest, I'm on Corporate Connection Scholarship Committee. And so part of what we look at is your leadership in the community. We look at your leadership in terms of student organizations, because what we're looking for is to give money to people who are going to make a difference. And people who just sit back in the library and just study all day are not the type of people that we think are going to make a difference for the black community.
I can just take one minute. This came up actually today. I was interviewing for an executive assistant position today, interviewed 4 people. One woman, who I looked at her resume, she worked at a gas station, she was a data inputter, she was a legal assistant somewhere else. And I asked her, where in these positions, because she had listed leadership as one of her characteristics, where in these positions did you exhibit leadership? And her answer was all of them. And she said that she approached every job that she took with the idea that she was going to be excellent and that she was going to make a difference no matter what job it was. So you don't have to be a leader of organization in order to be a leader. You can actually lead others when you're on the front lines.
Hello, my name is Greg Hammond, and I'm a graduating senior majoring in logistics management with a minor in Spanish. And so my question is, I see that a common theme throughout all the discussion is ownership of success. And so myself as an early entrepreneur or new entrepreneur, and many of us who want to become business owners, what advice would you have to us as far as being an entrepreneur, navigating that world of business, and then making sure you become successful in the business arena?
I'll go ahead and start. I've been a part of startup organizations that connect people. So it's not necessarily a business, but it's more an organization. So you look at black sports professionals. Since 2006, we've started an organization that, in all the major sports markets across the country, we have a BSP chapter, if you will, because we don't have enough diversity. And organizations can still say, we can't find enough diverse candidates, and then that's their rationale for not exploring that or being more curious to find those. But I've come across a lot of people, especially in the sports industry, that may not have followed the path of school and known about the ability to study sports and try to get in it kind of as this is my company. I have my full-time job. I'm starting this business, and it's tough to see them struggle. It's so tough to get into the sports industry on the business side. It's tough to see them struggle to already go down the path and then try to detour. But one of the things that I've seen is, and would advise other entrepreneurs, is even though you're studying that and that's your focus, and you can go right into angel investors and all the things that they're teaching you right now. It is not a bad thing to go into corporate America or that industry of choice and learn from the inside before going outside. And I've seen it, be more successful. You see people who've been in the sports industry and get to a very senior level, 15 years, and then they go out and have a very successful consulting agency because they know the industry, they have the relationships. So that would be for entrepreneurs. I've seen people who are just so unfocused to have 2, 3 companies and trying different areas and seeing what works, or trying to have the side company and waiting to have a critical mass of business and then stepping away from the full-time job. And those are all good paths, but that's just another one to think of. Stay on the inside, learn all you can, meet the movers and shakers and the influencers so that your company 5, 10 years into your career can be more successful than starting out right from school.
Let me throw one thing, and I should have brought this up when the question was what would I have done differently when I was in college. One of the things I will tell you that I was extremely guilty of is coming to class to learn to get a grade. And the advice I would give to you is while you're here on this campus, every book you read, every class that you take, every session you go to, you need to have a mindset, how can I take this information and make money? Period. That's why you're here, to learn how to make money, how to eat, how to be self-sustaining. And one of the things that is different about how you've learned in high school and how a lot of times they teach you, in a college environment, our job and how we add value is we provide solutions to people who don't have the know-how to do it themselves, don't have the time to do it themselves, or just don't want to be bothered with it. Okay? If you look at every business model that's successful, it falls in probably one of those 3 sectors. And so you need to be thinking about, regardless of what you're studying, how does the rest of the world not know what I know? And how can I understand how I can use my intelligence to solve something for somebody? And how do I go about figuring out what's the value of that? So like, for example, I don't know anything about changing a toilet, and guess what? My plumber charges me $75 an hour, and I cut that check every time. Does that mean that he's not as intellectually savvy as I am because I have 3 degrees and he doesn't have any? It really doesn't matter, because he's solving a problem that I have that I can't solve on my own. So the whole premise about entrepreneurship is understanding what do you know and what skill set do you have and what access to data can you provide and what analytics can you do for people that they can't do for themselves. And that's the whole business model. It's not complicated. You just got to change your thinking from I'm here to just get a good grade to I'm here to learn how in the world I take this knowledge and make money with it.
No, Doug Smith, I serve as the Associate Director for Development at our Medical Center here at Ohio State. Quick question, can you talk about the role of mentorship and championship as it relates to where you guys are today in your business?
I can't emphasize the importance of that enough. It's in terms of my career, people who have gone before me have been instrumental in opening doors and giving me ideas. I think it's an absolute requirement. No matter how good you are, unless you have incredible luck, you need somebody else out there to help open doors. And the way to meet them is there's no set way. It could be you give a presentation at a bar event, which I did, and it was somebody who was sitting in the audience liked it, and she gave me access to other bar committees that then led to other things. So it was my performance at that one event that led to others. Sometimes people are what I call anti-mentors. They are the people that you realize that you don't want to do what they're doing because you think they're doing it wrong. And so they teach you by example because you're going to do the opposite of what they do. But one of the reasons why I'm diligent about following up and when people contact me to ask for help, to go out to coffee, to talk about various things, I do it because that's how I've gotten ahead because there have been people who open doors for me, and I want to open doors for folks coming behind. So it's important you can do it through your performance, through your job, through your church, through your fraternity, through public service. I met people who helped me when I was just volunteering out in the community. I joined boards here in Columbus when I moved here. and it was that board membership that introduced me to people who helped me get this job. So that type of activity, that type of just connections to the community can be very helpful and important.
The one thing I will throw in, and I'll just be quick with it, is you need to understand that you need to find value in those relationships before you need it. Okay? The position I have now, I got it because I was recommended by the CFO of the Financial Services Division. And guess what? Our relationship started 12 years ago playing basketball at the Dublin Rec Center. Tim Fromeyer, I didn't even know he worked at Nationwide when I first got there in 2005. And guess what? Because of the relationship that we had and because of the relationship that we maintained, which was casual, he was willing to recommend me when this opportunity came, when the president of the business unit tapped in his ear as his kind of go-to guy on who do you think that you'd like to nominate. Who in the world would have thought when I'm playing pickup basketball 12 years ago that that relationship would cause me to become chief of staff? Who in the world would have thought that when I was a freshman at Miami and I'm talking to Rosemary McCullough about this girl just dumped me and I don't know if I'm going to do well, that she was going to be the one who sat there and sponsored me to Ohio State and leveraged a Dean Scholarship for me. So one of the things you have to understand, and this goes back to my arrogance comment earlier, don't think that you got it going on so much that you can't leverage the rest of the world in terms of who they know and that they're willing to support you. You know, it's just one of those lessons learned.
And I'll say quickly, Doug's question was great because he talked about mentors, plural, that because the pipeline of diversity, this room, as you can see, there's just more and more of us that are coming up through the ranks. It's hard to have that mentor that you see a lot, and that has a lot of time to spend with you because we all are inspired by how many of us are coming through and we want to help as many as possible. So I would advise to have multiple mentors instead of having one that you can spend a lot of time with and have that arm's length relationship and you go golfing every Saturday. That's less and less likely, but having multiple mentors in different areas that you get to spend a little bit of time with. If it's coffee, if it's breakfast, if it's quarterly. People think a lot of mentors, it's more than once a quarter, but sometimes that's all you get, but you get a wider range of experiences and that network you have to help you when you need it is a little bit larger too. So for the people that want to be mentors, help them as well of getting the coffees and the breakfast with Carter and understanding if they can't mentor you and see you twice a month. It's just, that's changed because there's so many more people to help and it's just become tougher. So focus on multiple mentors, but also critically watch people. Watch people on TV and how they orate and how they communicate, how they handle crises. And learn from them if it's osmosis and it just matriculates into you. Watch how people in bad moments and in successful moments operate, and you can learn that way as well.
I just wanted to add one more thing, and this is the language issue, and I heard somebody
All right,
say...
Mr. Jackson, you're reaching your limit on add-ons. but go ahead.
We talk about mentors all the time, and I just want to suggest change the language a little bit. Change the language to what your personal board of directors is. That's what you hear a lot of professionals talking about, and it goes exactly what we were just referring to. It allows you to have more people in your circle. It allows you to be very focused about if one person is really about financial support, then that person serves that role. If somebody else is really a career advisor, then that's their role. If you're looking for somebody to help you deal with personal issues and spiritual life, then that's your board of directors. So don't get caught up in thinking it's just one person, but thinking about it's a collective of people who have a skill set that can help you in that particular area.
Great. So right now what we're going to do, okay. We're going to go rapid fire. So first we're going to go here, and then, 1 second, we're going to go here, we're going to go here, over here, and that might take us to our time limit. If not, I'll get you two guys over here at the end. And then for each question, one response. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Kwame Christian. I'm an attorney and a proud graduate of the Ohio State University. And so my question is going to John. I was wondering if you could give some advice on how we could balance our self-expression and maintaining a strong professional appearance in the workplace of young black men.
So when you say strong self-expression, what does that mean?
I mean, I can tell some people have a lot of style, but sometimes that same style can lose you a job when you walk into an interview.
Did you ask him that because he has more style than the other?
Now, I'll just tell you my view, okay, and this is just a John Jacksonism. My premise is, my number one objective is to make money, okay? And I'm willing to do, generally speaking, things that are legal and my own personal integrity, okay? And so some of the things that I do is I stay cleanly shaven on a regular basis. I've had the same haircut for 25 years. You can see that I dress generally conservatively. And so one of the things that my dad taught me, and I try to use this as a life lesson, he said, don't allow who you look like or what you're wearing or what comes out of your mouth to be an easy reason for why somebody chooses not to be in alignment with you. Whether it's from a job perspective, whether it's a potential client, the idea is force them to have to make the decision on the substance that they just don't like you because you're black. And so I've taken that wisdom, and so I try to be as crisp as possible. I try to communicate in a way that's as crisp as possible and present myself in a manner that I think is most favorable, because I need to make sure that the brand of black men is being enhanced. And I want to make sure in every interaction that I have with somebody that if they choose not to do business with me, that they have to acknowledge that it's because they don't want to deal with the black man, but not because of some kind of procedural issue that I didn't do correctly. Now, that's just me. Now, you ask my brother, who's an artist, he had dreadlocks forever. Other brothers like goatees and beards and all sorts of stuff. So I'm not here to tell you that that's not right or conducive for you in your career. I'm just telling you the choices that I've made, and I think that they work well for me. And you have to decide what the right balance is for you. You know, whether that's the color of the tie. I tend to go with white shirts and blue shirts because that's standard for attorneys. But every once in a while, I gotta hit them with the flavor like you have one.
All right, so we go here and then over here.
Good evening, my name is Amjad Osman. I'm a third year here studying finance. My question is for Mr. Stewart. Can you talk about a time where you failed at something and how you kept that from being a reflection of your work ethic or your personality?
I'm glad I didn't get that question.
I have failed routinely throughout my career when it comes to job interviews. I have not gotten every job I wanted to go for. Can't put a percentage on it, but it's happened enough that I can tell you it's happened a fair amount. You interview for jobs throughout life. You know, when I interviewed for teaching jobs, it took me my third or fourth school before they hired me. When I tried to become an AUSA the first time, I think it took my third or fourth time interviewing and submitting my application. Some jobs I went for when I came out of law school, I tried to become a management consultant. Never got a job. I tried to become an investment banker. Didn't happen. So that type of failure, the first time hurts a lot. 40th or 50th time, it doesn't hurt so much. And the way I deal with it is, it wasn't meant to be, but I'm not going to let it stop me from continuing on my way. And sometimes I switch courses, sometimes I stay the course. But I guess most of all, I didn't give up on myself. I didn't take it personally and say there's something wrong with me. I took it to say I could get better. I can learn, perhaps, but I'm going to keep going. They can knock me down, but they're not going to stop me from going forward. And again, it might be a direction switch, but it's not going to be a momentum stop.
Thank you. We will go here and then tomorrow.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Charles C. I'm an attorney and deputy chancellor for the Ohio Board of Regents. And the young brother took the question about adversity, but I want to flip it and ask you about the importance of and the willingness to take professional risk in order to continue your path forward and upward. So if you can just speak, one of you can just speak to the importance of taking professional risk.
Do you have anyone you want to direct a question to?
The gentleman on the end.
I would definitely say the risks that I thought I had in flipping it was failing myself and not seeing the business side of sports and being able to study that earlier. And so you can imagine the amount of regret because of the financial consequences of getting my MBA, studying companies like Nationwide and Cardinal Health and IBM, and not really being passionate about it, and then having to do another 1.5 years of courses where we're finally talking about business, but it's in a sports context. It's what's the Green Bay Packers bottom line. I'm all about that. But those years after that, I just had a lot of regret. When I got to the Cavaliers, I just thought, I could have been doing this for 2 years right out of undergrad at Cincinnati. Why, God, did you have me go to Ohio State for not just 1 degree, but 2 degrees? It was a great time and a lot of great people, but why? If you knew this was my purpose, why? And that flipped so much, and it just hit me one day where you have all of these executives that you're working with now who want to go back and get their MBA, and they're thinking about the executive online program, or do they need to go back full time, or just stopping their careers, and you've got that out the way. And so I started to understand and have that heavenly wisdom as you get older, that this was my path, and even though it seemed like I took missteps, everything works out for the greater good. And saying, when I got to the Cavs, I thought I'd be there forever. That was my lifelong dream. The NBA, we're doing well. Who would have known, if you asked me what's your 5-year plan, that I would be back in my hometown at a sports commission and loving it even more. So all of those things just work out. But when I got back to Columbus, and even when I was with the Cavaliers, the relationships that I built here at Ohio State in this time where I just thought I was toiling along, they just kept popping up and benefiting me while I was there, which helped, raise my profile. And then when I got back to Columbus, it's just like the whole thing was just anointed. So the risk of things not going well, having a lot of regret, and still looking ahead where you have to make more sacrifices, that's my story. And I didn't know it would work out this well, but I do have to admit that I had a lot of regret in asking why those early years in sports before God just showed me, here's why, and you just got to learn to trust me.
Mario, last question.
Hi, I'm Mario Roberts. I'm a graduating senior as well in journalism and pre-law. I'm directing my question to Mr. Stewart. What are some of your sources of inspiration when you get knocked down, don't get those interviews? Also, when you just have a really harsh workload, how do you get through that? What do you look to in order to get you through those situations?
For me, it's a combination of things. One, in terms of the inner strength and inner message about getting back on your feet, I have mentors throughout my career and life that told me that. In fact, another example of failure is my very first motion when I was a young associate in San Francisco. I was doing pro bono work with the NAACP, and it was a huge motions argument as to whether or not a consent decree would continue, and they picked me to argue it, and I lost it. I lost the motion, and the managing partner of the law firm said, it's like football, and if you're a cornerback, you try to make a tackle, you get knocked down, you come back up. So that message has been repeated to me throughout my career, enough so, and I realized I failed, and I've lived. It hasn't been the end of the world. So living through a series of failures makes you stronger in some sense. Personally, in terms of how I deal with the stress of it all, is exercise. I was a high school athlete. I played rugby in college, and I found that when my mind gets going and I feel tense, I need an outlet. I can't keep things bottled up inside, because you do get frustrated when you lose. You do get frustrated when you fail, and you've got to have an outlet. And some people use poetry, some people journal, some people shout and hit a punching bag. For me, it's running, lifting, and just exercise. That's how I get out my personal frustration. It allows me to release and then get ready for the next day.
All right, real quick, we'll do one more question. So we'll end with you.
My name is Daryl Grimm, a physician at OSU Med Center. You guys obviously operate at a very high level. How do you, and I'll direct my question to Mr. Jackson, how do you ensure that you are continually adding value to those above you? So how do you continually lead up?
Brief response.
It took me 15 years, so lean on this wisdom, that my career path is based upon the success of my boss. It's really that simple. And when you start changing your lens from how in the world can I do this so that I could shine, and it's really about how in the world can I make sure that my boss shines, the bottom line is you glide with that particular individual, you know, and you got to realize it's very similar to Batman and Robin type scenario where it's really about a team spirit, you know, it's about team involvement. And what I've always had to learn is, and this is a tough pill, is the hierarchy is the board of directors, and they've selected a president. The president has selected an executive vice president, and the executive vice president is selected downward. None of those people at the top 4 levels of the house has chosen me. So for me to sit there and think that my responsibility is to do their job is very naive and is not, and very self-serving. And so once you start understanding that you're part of the team and that your first priority is to make sure that you're doing things to help your boss look successful, then I think the rest of it kind of flows from there, because the bottom line, and I'll tell you from somebody who manage people, it is very important for a manager to know that I can trust the people on my team, to keep me informed, to get good work product, to communicate to me appropriately so that I'm able to do that with my boss as well. So if you could learn that practice at this stage in your life and continue to enhance that, that'll set you apart from probably 80% of the rest of the people in the workplace, because they're focused 100% on how can I shine, sometimes at the expense of the person who pays their paycheck. So,
Thank you. And what we'll do now is I'll ask for each of you to just give some brief last remarks based on what we've covered today. So any final remarks? I ask that you keep it about a minute in length. We'll start first with Mr. Carter. Stewart, I'm sorry.
One lesson that I really have for the students is pass the marshmallow test. And by that I mean, you may have heard about this test where they came into a room, took kids into a room who were, I don't know, 6, 7 years old. They put one marshmallow in front of them and said, you can have this marshmallow now, but if you wait 5 minutes, we're going to come and bring the second marshmallow in, and you can have both marshmallows. And they tracked these kids throughout their lifetime, and they found that those kids who were able to have the self-discipline to wait for 5 minutes to take 2 marshmallows instead of 1, on average did better and were more successful in life. And I think that that message is critical, especially in today's time when instant gratification is the norm. When you gotta have money now, you gotta have a big TV now, you gotta have a vacation overseas now. That is a dangerous message. And so I would urge you to pass the marshmallow test, have the self-discipline to realize that things come in stages. There's time in your career trajectory to get where you want to go. You don't have to have everything now and worry about having everything now.
And actually, just real quick, you can look that up on YouTube. It's still on YouTube, the marshmallow test. Very good reference. Yeah.
The thing that I just wanted to share with you guys, and Bruce has talked about it a number of times, is spend this time being creative about what you have a passion for, what you're just naturally intellectually curious about, and that you'll study till 1 o'clock in the morning just because you want to know it better than anybody else. Because the reality is, where you have your passion is where you never have a job, and that you will do everything that's necessary to be the best at it in your particular space. I will tell you, I came out of law school with the focus on making as much money as I could, and that was great when we got student loans. Until I turned 42 was the first time I started asking myself the question about who is John Jackson as a human being. You know, and I realized that John Jackson, primarily as a human being, is the DJ that liked to set the party off. He was the one that was always having something to talk to somebody. In high school, they elected me as the most talkative, as you probably never guessed. And so I created the story in my mind that I had to do this as a lawyer intellectually to make my parents proud. I had to sit there and take on the burden that there weren't any black attorneys, and so therefore it was going to be me. And so I lived that life. I drove down that lane for 15 years, and while it's been very well for my family, I had to come to grips that my soul and my spirit was not being satisfied on a day-to-day basis. And so I allowed myself the flexibility to say making money wasn't the #1 objective for the first time in my life, and that trying to be me and being honest about it was #1 in my life. And so that's when I realized that from a career perspective, I'm more in alignment with sales. I'm more in alignment with business development, because that allows me to talk to people on a regular basis. It allows me to figure out how can we come together and do knowledge sharing, which is what I enjoy doing. And so hopefully that you guys will start thinking about that now as your freshmen and sophomores, to think, who am I as a person? What am I excited about? And then spend your time trying to study in spaces and spend time with placement offices to try to help you figure that out early, because it would be a disservice for you to spend 20 years like I did trying to realize that you weren't the person who you tried to claim yourself to be. Be honest with yourself and find peace, joy, and happiness in doing that.
You know, I'll go ahead and close and just say, you know, be comfortable in yourself. And that takes a lot of work. Be comfortable in your smile. Because you all know, and I'm looking at you right now, we all can easily be portrayed as angry black men. And we know our prowess can be intimidating, whether we try or not. And so be comfortable in your smile. And it's not a cheesy smile. It's that smile that you're comfortable with when you go and meet people that you've worked on, and you understand your own smile, that you can turn it up a little bit if you need to, and you can scale it down. But continue with the emotional intelligence for yourself first before you get to others, and then you can go into a room, and if it's a white woman, you can understand it if she's not comfortable. And that's something that you have to understand, because whether you like it or not, it can come back on you. And so you see all the things that are happening, you know, in the media, and just people not behaving well, but just be comfortable in yourself and understand your smile, where you're more comfortable to put it on display and make people feel comfortable. And that is an art and a science that you have to have. There isn't a class for it. All you can do is learn it. But as black men, muscular, strong, athletic, that's what we were talking about with attire. You may have to dial it back for that interview, knowing that you want to have the beard and the goatee and the earring, go into the interview and be comfortable enough to scale it back to that core and not be moved. I don't have my full swagger going on today, but I'm still going to do this interview well. And then once you get into the environment, you can feel out whether I can turn it back up and wear that nice purple shirt or that pink shirt based on what you see. But you have to know you may have to scale yourself down to your core for this interview before you get it. And then from there you can expand. But I've seen too many guys that aren't comfortable with their smile, or they don't articulate and aren't heard and don't project, walk by somebody or interact, and you can see it right away whether this person is comfortable with that or this person is, you got a competitive advantage. I like the presentation and the packaging, and so you have to be comfortable within yourself before anybody else can be comfortable with you.
Thank you. I think there's something here for everybody. So whether as students from high school up to college, up to graduate professional, to even the professionals here, we've covered a huge array of topics. This was almost like a semester-long course within a span of an hour and a half as it relates to career development and professionalism. Some of the things that I've highlighted was, that it's not just about you, that it's about making sure that your supervisor looks good. Mr. Stewart spoke eloquently in regards to managing and dealing with failure and the importance of getting back up. Mr. Wimbish plenty of times hit on the topic of introspection, and they kind of all focused on that at the end in regards to their remarks about knowing who you are as a person. And in the words of the director of the center, one of his favorite comments, because whenever you're around someone enough, when they give remarks and comments, you hear the pattern. And so one of the things that Dr. Moore says is who are you? And are you who you say you are? And a couple people are not like, yeah, he says that all the time. But it's true, and it's very important, it's very significant. So I hope you took notes. This is a lot of good information. We hear so many narratives about black males. Some of them negative in regards to what's going on right now. Some of them uplifting in regards to things that we're doing in society. But I don't know if we hear too often enough in regards to profession and professionalism and career development. Not always the sexiest things. You know, not the ones that grab the attention and grab people's ear, but they're so essential and key. Most of the time that we spend in work. And so how do we handle and manage that work life, that professional life that we all will have one day? And so again, I hope that you took a lot away from this. I know that I did. I just want to thank these gentlemen for taking time out of their schedule in regards to the partnership, compromise, and understanding with their spouses, with their partners, and allowing them to be here and for them taking time out. So please give our panelists a great warm round of applause.